Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Many dads feel under-supported in their role as fathers because traditional gender norms still often place in primary caregiving focuses on mothers. This week, I'm joined by Lloyd, a UK-based advocate for improved paternity leave and co-founder of the Dad Shift.
We are the worst in Europe when it comes to paternity leave. We are really out of step with how I think we see ourselves as a country and our values around gender equality, and it's well past time we changed.
For most of our children's life, we know them as adults. It's a very short amount of time that we know them as children. And I guess it plays into that good old phrase of you kind of don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Most police officers get the first week at full pay, but the second week is at statutory pay. And most of them just can't afford it. So 60% are going back after just 1 week.
Hello, I'm Pip, and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth, and beyond. Many dads feel under-supported in their role as fathers because traditional gender norms still often place in primary caregiving focuses on mothers. While times are slowly changing, many workplaces still offer limited paternity leave, making it difficult for dads to bond with their newborns in those crucial early weeks. Even when paternity leave is available, there can be pressure, either social or professional, to return to work quickly, reinforcing the outdated idea that a father's primary role is financial rather than emotional. Without strong support systems from employers to parenting communities, many dads struggle to feel included and confident in their role, missing out on key bonding opportunities that are so important for them both and also for their children. This week, I'm joined by Lloyd, a UK-based advocate for improved paternity leave and co-founder of the Dad Shift, an organisation dedicated to campaigning for better paternity leave policies in the UK. After becoming a dad, he recognised the significant barriers that limited fathers' involvement in bonding and caring for their family. The UK statutory paternity leave offers just 2 weeks at a rate of £184 a week, one of the least supportive systems in Europe. So welcome, Alex, and thank you for the important work you're doing to raise the fact that this just isn't good enough, is it?
No, well, thank you for having me. No, it's not good enough at all. As you say, we are the worst in Europe when it comes to paternity leave. We are really out of step with how I think we see ourselves as a country and our values around gender equality. And it's well past time we changed. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, literally shout that from the rooftops. This is what we need. Now, I mean, perhaps it sounds obvious to me why, Alex, but tell us what led to the Dad Shift being born, because this is clearly a massive passion project of yours.
Yes, it is. So I have a son. He's just turned 3, and we actually have another one on the way too.
Oh, congratulations. I didn't know that.
No, it's due in August. So we're just about 21 weeks. So that's exciting. And my co-founder George has had a baby 3 days ago, so we're very on brand. We're all doing
in the baby moon, yeah.
But yeah, I have a son who's 3, and I was always very clear when I became a parent, I wanted to be a really active dad, and I wanted to try and do things as equally as possible with my wife, both so that she can carry on in her career. She does awesome stuff, and we wanted to make sure she could keep doing that, but also so that I got that joy of being a big part of my son's life, and he had that bond with me. And that was particularly important to me because My dad really didn't get that with us when we were younger. Men of his generation, there was no paternity leave at all. So my brother was born 9 o'clock Sunday night. He was back at work 9 a.m. the next day. And he worked in a really stressful job, really long hours, didn't really see us 5 days a week, wasn't involved in our care. And as a result, we didn't really bond with him as we did with our mum. He ended up kind of the outside of the family unit, and it contributed to the breakdown of his marriage ultimately. And we have a good relationship as adults, and he's a very devoted, soppy grandparent to my son. It's in some ways to my surprise, and it's given us a lens to start talking about his own experience. And he deeply regrets that he wasn't more there and more able to be there. But he said, I didn't know anything different. I didn't know you could be different. And I think our attitudes of a society have changed, but a lot of the systems and the barriers that make it hard for men to be there are still in place. And that is still too often the experience of men. And so in trying to do things as equally as possible and trying to be involved as I could, we've been lucky that we've made it work, but there are so many jigsaw places that have to fall in place to make it possible in this country, because we have all these things pushing against more equal parenting. So really expensive childcare, lack of flexible working, and then obviously a big one is our rubbish paternity leave that ends up pushing the responsibility to look after children pretty much solely onto mothers.
Yeah, 100%. How powerful of your dad, and how brave, because like we say, today's generation, I feel like, and I don't want to speak for men, but I feel like we are more open to talking about mental health and gendered roles in a more dynamic, flexible way. I know there's work to be done, but when I think back to sort of my father's generation versus my husband's, I know that for my dad, actually, those conversations are really hard. And for your dad to say, actually, he regrets not having more of a caring responsibility, I think it's really brave.
I agree. And, we've talked before I launched this campaign, we started talking about it explicitly because look, people are going to ask, why am I doing this? And I can say something else if you want, but like, this is the real reason. He was like, yeah, fine, say it, like, talk about it. I really respect him for that he's willing to be open about it and willing for me to be open about it.
Definitely. And I think if we can have, like, I don't know how many grandparents listen to my podcast, Alex, but I want them to listen to this one, because I feel like if they can have these conversations with their adult sons, that actually this was their journey and this is what they then regret, we can start planting that seed, can't we, of change really early.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, interestingly, I've had, the conversation with him isn't the only one I've had with men of his generation and other evidence I've seen. And I think there is I'd love to, maybe the listeners to your show will write in or call in and tell you about it. But I suspect that as men get older, they realize that the thing that really mattered in their life was their kids and their relationship with their kids. And I suspect it's probably more common than we recognize for people to regret that they didn't have that.
Completely agree, it must be. And I saw something on social media a few weeks ago that said that we only have, for most of our children's life, we know them as adults. It's a very short amount of time that we know them as children. And I guess it plays into that good old phrase of you kind of don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Yeah.
So for, now as your dad as a grandparent, actually seeing that kind of, that almost polar view of, actually, I missed these days with, my young family, and almost, I guess, trying to perhaps relive them as a grandparent.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And he's lucky. He's got my son, and then his wife has got a few grandkids as well, and they're devoted to him as well. And so he has. I see him having that bond with these young kids that I think he didn't have. So that's really nice.
Yeah, he's getting it in now. How bad is it, Alex? How bad is the UK paternity system compared to maybe other countries where it's being done better?
It's very bad. So it's 2 weeks at £184 a week. In fact, in a couple of days, it's going up to £187 a week. So
pay rise.
Yeah, we're cashing in.
I don't think you can even get a coffee for £3.
Exactly. It's true, you can't. So yeah, £184 a week. That is 187. That's less than half a minimum wage. Technically below the level of poverty pay.
Wow.
And by comparison, the average across Europe is the equivalent of 8 weeks at full pay. So if you take our 2 weeks at £184 a week and compare it to the average salary, it works out 2 days of full pay on an average salary compared to 8 weeks average across Europe. And then the countries who are doing it best, you look at, for example, Spain. So Spain were where we were 7 years ago. They had 2 weeks. and they have gradually increased it a week or two at a time over a course of a few years. It's now 16 weeks at 100% pay, and they're looking to, it's been such a success, they're looking to increase it to 20 weeks 100% pay. In Sweden, you have 90 days for each parent that is ring fenced for that parent, so that only they can use it. And then on top, 300 days that you can share between each parent, all at a good level of pay. You can go on and on. We are miles and miles behind where other countries are. And finally, the other thing that we do badly when it comes to paternity leave is self-employed people are entitled to absolutely nothing, which again is unusual. Most European countries give self-employed people the same entitlement as employed people. And I've spoken to, for example, self-employed tradesmen. There are a lot of builders, plumbers, and so on who are self-employed. And one guy in particular who had 2 emergency C-sections, or his wife did, for his 2 kids. Both were born premature and ended up in C-sections. Each time he took 6 weeks off to look after her. He did the right thing, stepped up. And the financial pressure that's put on them has almost destroyed him. And still, he said, 6 years on, I've not recovered financially. It's destroyed his mental health, his wife's mental health. He attempted suicide at one point. It got so bad. And this is all for the sake of properly supporting new parents with a few £1,000s in the first weeks after their life. The cost of not doing that is enormous.
My brand new book, Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth, is now available. So much more than a book, this is a guide that allows me to hold your hand through your birth preparation journey. With over a decade of experience and knowledge packed in to ensure you really are empowered in the way you deserve to achieve a positive birth, regardless of the twists and turns that crop up. Make sure that you get your hands on Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth book now and are empowered to have the birth experience that you deserve. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. That story is just profound, isn't it? That actually that's deemed acceptable in the UK. And of course it's not by any stretch of the imagination, but the fact that, the paternity leave policy seems to recognise that that's an okay way to be treating people, like say below the line of poverty. It's just, and this is families, this is children that we're really trying to work to protect, and we're actually failing them before we sometimes even get out of hospital. And I think what I was thinking when you were talking there, Alex, was we're in this awful duo, because I know that, as a midwife and as a mum, the support for mums, for example, that dad whose partner had an emergency cesarean section, we're in a place now where women are expected the day after major surgery or having birthed their baby with who knows what physical and psychological trauma to get to clinic appointments. No one's coming to their house very often now. They're expected to attend appointments. The support is much, much less in the community. Therefore, we need to be able to rely on the partner. And we can't when there isn't that shift either. So we've kind of taken away social support in every single way for families, both from a healthcare point of view, but also from a family unit point of view. And it is no wonder we're in this place where actually families are struggling so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't need to tell you this. You'll know this far better than me or anyone. But we've collected, we have this survey where people can share their experiences, and 6,000 people have filled it in now. And so many of the stories are from mothers who had a cesarean section and were told this is going to take you 6 weeks to recover. And some were lucky and it healed very quickly. Some were unlucky and it took 6 weeks or longer.
Yeah.
And they said, I was just left. I was told, you can't lift your baby, it's too heavy. And I was just left. And one person who said, the day my husband went back from paternity leave was just the worst day of my life, because I was in agony, and eventually her stitches ripped on the cesarean because, it wasn't healing properly, and she was doing all the stuff she wasn't meant to do. And that is one part of the puzzle where the support that we're offering families through paternity leave, and of course this applies not just to dads, but it applies to non-birthing parents of all kinds, mums in same-sex relationships, non-binary parents, one half of an adoptive couple. But the support we are providing just doesn't match the physical reality of birthing and looking after a small child.
And let's be honest, we're talking about just allowing parents to survive. If we want parents to actually be able to thrive, that's a whole nother conversation. The current sort of situation is at the point where people just physically can't meet the day-to-day needs. It's not even this beautiful glamorized idea of having lots of time, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the mental health aspect of it is the other obviously enormous issue with our current system in the immediate term, before you get into stuff around how it determines how people parent long term, which I'm sure we can come on to. But in the immediate term, there is very clear evidence that better paternity leave improves mental health outcomes for mothers as well as for fathers. And what we find is that 2/3 of men say they weren't mentally ready to go back after 2 weeks. And you enter into this sort of, as a man, you enter into this pressure cooker where you've got, having a baby is very expensive. I think we all know that, a pram is like buying a car these days. Some of them are so expensive. So your financial pressure is going up at the same time as your earnings are massively plummeting. Like your paternity leave, on an average salary, it costs you $1,000 to take that paternity leave in lost earnings. Your partner is on maternity leave, which is also really poorly paid. And then you've got that pressure on top of the pressure of work hasn't changed. They expect you to be there 100% doing your job. And then you're trying to be a good parent. You're trying to be there for your partner and your baby, and you're probably stressed that they're struggling as well. And so you see a lot of dads, more than I think we recognize, really suffering. And then, of course, for mothers, they are often left on their own without sleep, without support. And so it has a massive impact on maternal mental health as well. And again, that's just one of the, aside from the kind of moral element of this, there is a very pragmatic case for the government to improve this, because it will reduce the pressure on mental health services. I think PricewaterhouseCoopers did some modelling that better paternity leave would save something like £1.5 billion in mental health costs to the NHS over 20 years, and stop 500,000 cases of depression in new parents just from better paternity leave.
Yeah, I can see it. I totally get it. And I think also, like, if we zoom out, we know like there's so much out there about maternal and paternal mental health and anxiety disorders, and how that impacts child mental well-being and emotional intelligence and attachment. So actually we are going to have even more saving on that child. And breastfeeding rates, we know breastfeeding rates are, their initiation rates are great, and then they plummet because there's no support. We're spending so much time and energy telling people how great it is for babies and how great it is for mums, but there's actually no support for people to do it. And then when you are left on your own, recovering, partner's gone back to work, it feels like an absolutely impossible task. But we know if we improve that, we would also save so much money in childhood illnesses and hospital admissions. So it seems like a no-brainer, but it's just not happening, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the other point to this is there's a really good economic argument as well. So this is the only advantage really of being absolutely bottom of the table, is you can see how this has panned out in every other country that has improved things.
Yeah.
And the Joseph Rowntree Foundation recently did a model that showed that if you moved paternity leave up to 6 weeks at 90% pay, which really is an absolute bare minimum for what we should be having in the short term, because it helps, the evidence from other countries is that it helps mothers who want to go back to work when they want to. So they might take on more days of work, or they might go back to work when actually they would have left.
Yeah.
You end up growing the economy by £2.6 billion, but the cost to the Treasury is an absolute fraction of that, sort of 200 million. So it's for every pound you put in, you get £13 back. And obviously you get better outcomes for kids. And it improves gender equality over the long term. It brings down the gender pay gap. There's very clear evidence of that as well. And on your point around breastfeeding, it's something that people sort of say, you see it on social media, some people say, well, dads can't do anything to help with breastfeeding. What's the point in them being there with breastfeeding? And I sort of say to people that our experiences are, our son really struggled to establish feeding, and he had a tongue tie. He lost a huge amount of weight after he was born. And my wife was really determined to do it and push through. And she spent 6 months pumping, and we did top up for feeding and stuff. And eventually she got there, and she ended up breastfeeding him for nearly 2 years in total. But the fact that I was there when it was really difficult early on, and could help her get some sleep when she needed it between the feeding, and could do all the sterilizing and the washing up and everything,
all the other stuff,
and just like make sure she didn't have to worry about it. Like, we've talked about it since. She said if that support wasn't there, she just would have given up straight away. There would be no choice to have carried on. So there is a huge amount that a supportive partner can do, even when it comes to things like breastfeeding. Obviously, you can't physically do.
100%. Oh my goodness, Alex, I've breastfed both our boys. I'm still breastfeeding Alfie, who's 10 months. And I remember saying with our first son, who's also 3, to my husband on day 3, if I didn't have the support from him at that stage, I wouldn't have carried on breastfeeding him. We've had difficult breastfeeding journeys with both, and I'm a midwife. Like, I understand this stuff, but the reality is it's hard, and it's such a big adjustment, and you're tired and you're recovering. And we know that like the hormonal shift in women when you've just given birth is the biggest you'll ever go through in your entire life. So your mood is super low and you feel really vulnerable. And actually that is a time where family units need to be tight, not, pulled apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the other part of this then that's crucial is how it establishes the way you parent longer term, those kind of crucial few weeks. So what you see, we have a really unusual paternity and maternity leave system in this country, and that paternity leave is very short and poorly paid, obviously. Our maternity leave is unusually long, but also really poorly paid, right? It's still one of the worst in Europe when it comes to maternity pay. So that really pushes families, whether or not they want to, into a stay-at-home, homemaker mum, breadwinner dad dynamic, where the father often gets only a couple of weeks to learn how to be a parent and to bond with their child. And often that's just not enough. And so you might, even if it is, you're there for those 2 weeks, you're hands-on, you feel like you're getting the hang of it, and then you're gone. And your partner is the one who's taking everything on. And then they're the one who learns, well, this is what this particular crying means, or this is what they like to eat, or this is how you cut this piece of food so they don't throw it away. And then the father tries to get involved in this, they don't want me, they're not bonded with me, they want their mum. And that slowly builds in. And then you get to a point a year in where the mother is coming back off maternity leave, and you look at the cost of childcare and you realize it's basically the same as one of your salaries. And you can't work flexibly around school pickup and stuff because your employer won't work. So you say, okay, who's going to take a step back? And at that point, it's almost default. It's the mother. And I've spoken to people, someone who used the phrase, we wanted to do everything equally, and then we woke up one day and found ourselves in the 1950s. And like, this isn't necessarily what most people want. And if it is what they want, that's great. That's fine. Like, what we want is more choice. But at the moment, that choice is taken away from a lot of people. And so this is why you see the motherhood penalty, as a lot of people call it, where the gender pay gap is something like 75% driven by motherhood. And the fact that women often, whether or not they want to take a step back from work, they get discriminated at work because they are seen as more likely to go off and have a baby. So they're overlooked for promotions, they lose their jobs. And there's really, really clear evidence in other countries that better paternity leave means that men take on much more childcare longer term. It improves gender equality, and it improves outcomes for kids. They end up happier, they do better at school, and it's really good for fathers themselves who have happier, longer lives. I've read some study that you're more productive at work, you're less likely to abuse drugs, even like all these benefits you get from being closer to your kids. And paternity leave is really the sort of the roots in the ground you need for that. And if you don't give people that time, then it just never happens for a lot of people.
100%. And I think, like that first 2 weeks, Alex, especially in a way with your first child, you overnight change who you are. Like, your life completely changes, doesn't it? And nothing can quite prepare you for being a duo and then all of a sudden having this small person that is dependent on you 24/7. And I think you definitely, to start with, run on this like almost shell shock adrenaline. And also what I see so much in dads or in birth partners is the impact of birth trauma. And actually, if we are back to work after 2 weeks of just running on adrenaline and what on earth's happened and what have we done, and I have no idea, what I should or shouldn't be doing, and are we getting this right, and all of that second guessing and sleep deprivation, we don't even consider trauma until much later down the line. And I think, in terms of mental health, we need that space, because I know there's so many dads that then get, pregnant again and haven't addressed trauma from their last birth because they just then had to get on with that treadmill of life. And that's just not acceptable either.
Yes, totally. I've heard from people who, went through traumatic birth experiences and have struggled, like really struggled, even really sadly, from people who, lost their baby during the birth and then back to work, basically straight away. And they just never had, the mother was left at home alone on maternity leave without their baby, struggling with that grief. The partner was straight back to work, didn't have space to grieve. I mean, really awful. But like even beyond that, I mean, actually, we had a story out yesterday about paternity leave in the police. There's a lot of problems with the way paternity leave is happening in the police, and one of them is that most police officers get the first week of full pay, but the second week is a statutory pay, and most of them just can't afford it. So 60% are going back after just 1 week. We've had stories from people who are saying, the day I was back, a week or two after my child was born, I'm not sleeping or anything. I'm driving with the blue lights on, high speed through town centres. Someone said, my mate's an NHS surgeon. He was back to work after 2 weeks doing operations on no sleep. I mean, it's just there's a basic safety issue in a lot of jobs. Again, going back to tradesmen, we did some research with tradesmen who a third of them don't take a single day. They just can't afford to take 1 day because they're self-employed. They go straight back. And again, over half said, I just felt unsafe. Like I'm operating power tools on a building site on zero sleep, and I didn't feel safe being there. And I think in a world where the expectation was fathers would sit in the waiting room reading the FT whilst the birth happened and have nothing really to do with the baby, then maybe. But now that's just not what we want or how things work. And men expected to, want to, and should play an active role in supporting their partner, look after the baby. And in that world, you need to create the space to care for just their basic needs around that time.
We're just hitting pause for a moment whilst I share something new and exciting with you. Have you ever wondered what's normal and what's not when it comes to your baby's poo? The colour, texture, and frequency of your baby's poo can provide valuable insight into their health and development. It can also help you determine when to seek advice from a healthcare professional. AptaClub's new AI poo tool makes it easy to understand what your baby's poo might indicate. You can even upload a photo, and the tool will analyse it to provide helpful information. You can check it out now at aptaclub.co.uk/baby/baby tools/poo tracker. Yeah, Alex, the work you're doing is just so important. How far away are we from any change? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, we're optimistic. So the government has recognised it's not very good. That's a good
first step, right?
So that's one of the reasons we started the campaign. Is the government committed in their manifesto in the election last summer to reviewing parental leave. They said, it's not working at the moment. We're going to review it as a whole. And they've now committed to starting that in June this year. And it's going to run for a year. And so our job as a campaign, and all the MPs who are supporting the campaign, there are tons of MPs who are supporting this issue, huge groundswell of support in the public as well. All of our jobs is to feed into that review and say, this is what's not working. This is what we need. We need longer, better paid paternity leave. So our hope is that review will recommend better paternity leave, and then the government will take action. So there's a good case scenario here where we've got change in a couple of years, a new paternity leave law on the statute books. The challenge is that we need to overcome is the government's very worried about the economy, the economic pictures. The music's never great, and so that's why it's so important to illustrate there's a really strong economic argument for this as well. It's something that basically should pay for itself and some. And it's a really good longer term investment in our kids, their development, and but also just in the basic workforce of the economy.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to see kind of what unfolds, because I feel like it just is not sustainable, is it? Where we kind of currently are. And where are we really currently? What options do dads have at the moment? We've talked about that kind of 2 week that you said the police have, where they have that 1 week and then a week of statutory. What kind of options are you seeing from the dads you speak to?
So most companies now offer some kind of top up on paternity leave, but most commonly that's just 2 weeks of full pay. So the pay really does matter. Like that's a crucial point. Yeah. If we get longer paternity leave, but it's still poorly paid, then it just excludes a bunch of people who can't afford it, so that you need both. So the pay does really matter, but 2 weeks is just not long enough. So the vast majority of people are still just getting 2 weeks. At the top end, you see people getting sort of 6 months or more at full pay. Actually, one of my co-founders, George, came into this because he is really lucky to work for a company where he had months at full pay, and it was he found it a transformational experience. And he knows that if he hadn't had that time, he wouldn't be an active parent because he really struggled early on, and it took time to push through that barrier. So that's at the top end. And then obviously self-employed people get nothing. So there is a real range. And that's part of the problem, is it's increasingly becoming a two-tier system. If you work for a big wealthy company who recognizes the benefits to them for staff productivity, morale, recruitment, and they offer you enhanced paternity leave, that's great. But if you work at a smaller company that can't afford it, then you don't. So that's why we need government action to bring it up for everyone. The other option on the table is shared parental leave. So that allows you to transfer up to 48 weeks from the birthing parent to the non-birthing parent, of which 37 are at the statutory rate of pay, so £184 a week. So in theory, that sounds good. The problem is that absolutely no one uses it. Almost no one uses it. It's less than 2% of families use it.
Wow.
And the reason for that is, one, it's so poorly paid that most people are just excluded. But the other is that without having proper designated ring-fence paternity leave, there's still the sense that you're taking away maternity leave from the mother. And maternity leave really matters too, right? Like mothers understandably want that time. And so a lot of people are reluctant to give that up just so that the father gets some time themselves. And that's why other countries have tried exactly the same thing, and it hasn't worked. And it's only worked when they brought in better ring-fence paternity leave. So there is shared parental leave. If you can use it, that's amazing. And we've heard really positive stories from people who have. But it's just out of reach for most people, and it's not the solution longer term.
What do you want to see, Alex? What's the dad shift like gold standard?
Gold standard, I think, is something like Sweden, where what the boxes it ticks are, there's a good amount of ring fence time for each parent. So it's use it or lose it. If dads don't take that time, they can't transfer it over. And that's really, it's a lot of evidence that you need that.
Yeah.
It's a good level of pay, but then on top, it also has that flexibility, the 300 days that you can share, which allows each couple to decide what works best for them rather than having it dictated to them by their gender. So that's absolute best standard. Sweden has been working on this for about 50 years. So they are quite far down the road from where we are. And we're realistic that we're not going to jump to that kind of system overnight. That costs a lot more. It would require higher taxes and so on. So the absolute bare minimum needs to be 6 weeks and 90%. We would like to see more, and would like to push for more, but that's the absolute bare minimum that we need. And
you're envisaging that almost as like a path to something better over time, but actually let's start shifting it a bit.
Yes, we need that shouldn't be the end of the road. I mean, that still brings us below the European average for context. So that needs to be a stepping point. And again, we're going to push for something better. And coming back to Spain's model, we think the way they've done it, of phasing increase over a number of years, so that you don't just jump to 16 weeks, but they went 5 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, so on. That's potentially a model that we could follow as well. So you could end up with more than 6 weeks, but the level of pay is really important. There's no good giving people 20 weeks and then paying it all at £184 a week.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely unsustainable. Yeah. And Alex, you said MPs are getting behind this. You need members of the public behind it. What can people listening do to support this change if they are really passionate about it, which I'm sure everyone's going to be, because it seems completely nonsensical to not support it. But what can people do to help?
So the best thing to do is you go onto our website, which is dadshift.org.uk, and there's a button at the top to add your name for better paternity leave. And if you do that, we can then send you emails. We have actions that people to take all the time. So for example, yesterday we were asking people to get in touch with their local police and crime commissioner and ask them to sort out paternity leave in the police, because obviously police officers deserve that support. But if we can get the police to do something, then it puts pressure on the government to take action nationally. So that's the first thing to do. Go to our website and sign up, and we'll then give you actions. If you're on social media, we're on Instagram and TikTok at DadShiftUK. And to be honest, just liking, engaging, sharing stuff is really important as well. It means that we reach more people will get involved, and it has that snowball effect.
Yeah, build that momentum. So guys, please do that now. It sounds like it's a super quick and easy thing to do, just to go onto the Dad Shift website. I'm going to be doing it too, because it doesn't just benefit dads. They're really important. But this is going to benefit our children. It benefits us selfishly as well. Like, this only benefits absolutely everybody. So Thank you, Alex. Now, everyone that comes on the podcast, I always ask for 3 top tips. I feel like one of them should definitely be get behind the dad shift and support a change. But what would your 3 top tips be to anyone listening?
One paternity leave themed top tip is there are some banks, if you've got a mortgage, who will give you a mortgage holiday when you're on parental leave. So they'll say you don't have to pay your mortgage for a few months. Wow. And then that can obviously be a massive help with the financial side. So that if you're about to go on parental leave, have a look into that. Your bank might be able to do that for you. So that's one boring financial tip.
That's a great initiative, isn't it?
It's something that we found out for a Scandinavian bank is doing it, and I looked into it, and actually, like, there are a few banks here. They don't make a big deal out of it, but it's technically something you can do at a few of them. So that's one tip, and then another tip. We recently got into. Obviously, everyone loves the Julia Donaldson books, but I recently found that she's done a bunch of audiobook recordings with her husband. They read them all out, and they're all on Spotify. And so they are keeping my son very happy doing nappy changes when he's otherwise very reluctant. The Julia Donaldson audiobooks on Spotify are real winners at the moment.
Julia Donaldson is just a hero, isn't she? Absolutely incredible. As are you and all the work you're doing. So thank you so much, Alex. And make sure you do, if you're listening, go and make sure you give the Dad Shift some support, because we've got to create a big old change in the UK when it comes to this. Thank you so much, Alex.
My pleasure.
If you have listened to this birth story, enjoyed it, and feel that you are ready to really embrace and dedicate yourself to having the most informed, supported, and empowered journey, and want to see if we may be able to support you in YPJ, your pregnancy and postnatal journey, please drop me a Instagram DM at midwife_pip, or get in touch on my email, pip@midwifepip.com, and let's chat through things and see if we might be a good match for each other. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and wishing you all the best on your journey through pregnancy, birth, and beyond.
Unexplored catacombs buried beneath the city. A crumbling castle perched on a mountain peak. A top-secret government bunker. A cursed mansion cloaked in legend. I'm Sasha Auerbach. Join me and Tom Ward every Wednesday and Sunday as we reveal the mysteries and histories of abandoned places around the world and ask, where did everyone go? Brought to you by Like a Shot, makers of Forbidden History. Search for Where Did Everyone Go on your favorite podcast platform.